NBA Jam Tournament Edition is a 1995 remake of the 1993 arcade smash hit NBA Jam, which also saw versions released on the Game Boy, Sega Genesis, Game Gear, Sega CD, Sega Saturn, Sony PlayStation, and Atari Jaguar, most of which was handled by Iguana Entertainment. The game was an early entry to feature NBA licensed players and teams, and its unique 2-on-2 take, combined with an extremely exaggerated style of play, allowed the developers to take a lot of creative license in favor of good arcade-style gameplay. The NBA had to have its arm twisted a bit to license to Midway. The deal ended up being that the league received $100 per cabinet sold. NBA Jam is flush with secret characters, power-ups, and other Easter eggs, most of which are found by either using specific initial inputs or joystick combinations before tip-off. One character notably missing from the game was Michael Jordan, absent in most NBA video games of the era, while Shaquille O'Neal could only be played in arcades. In fact, lead developer Mark Turnell noted in 2009 that, as a Pistons fan, given the rivalry with the Bulls, he'd slipped code into the game that would make last-second shots by Chicago against Detroit average out to be bricks. The mid-90s might have been the heyday of developer and publisher Midway, who saw success with NBA Jam, Mortal Kombat, NFL Blitz, and the Cruisin' series of racing titles, after coming to prominence by strategically cooperating with Taito and Namco to bring Space Invaders and Pac-Man, respectively, to US arcades. The game is still loved to date, as it saw remakes in 2003 and 2010, and Tim Kitzrow's famous phrases including "He's on fire" and "Boom shakalaka" are still part of basketball lexicon today. All in all, it's a joy of an arcade title that fits perfectly in its time and place. Thoughts?
So, this game was one of the first must-own sports games. Like, I can't think of any other game where you would go to a friend's house, and if they were a sports fan, you were guaranteed to find this in their library.
Do extreme sports count? Because skate or die!
Skate or die.
So I want to note here, by the way, so like the heyday of Midway, NBA Jam, Mortal Kombat, NFL Blitz, Cruisin', this is all the games I played while waiting for a movie to start.
Oh yeah, these were in every movie theater.
Yes.
These were in Ultra Zone, where you were waiting before like you were going to suit up to go into the arena. Any sort of venue that like had arcade machines had something Midway had made.
I mean, the Cruisin' series existed like between like 99 and 2009 in every single movie. I mean, I'm pretty sure some still have them.
If there was an arcade, or if there was like a smattering of arcade machines in one place, there's probably Cruisin' in there. It's like
Cruisin'.
Yeah.
that or Time Crisis. Like, it's going to be in there.
House of the Dead 1 through, I don't know, 12, however many there are now.
Like, wow, okay, Fuddruckers only has 3 machines, but there's Cruisin'.
Oh, man. It's actually really hard to think about like things that I kind of thought while playing this game, because it was from Season 1. You know,
so
from downtown all the way back. So, like, I think about it, and all I can remember was that painful shot that Matt did not make.
Oh, the 7-pointer as time was expiring, down by 6.
It needed exactly 7 points.
Now, I've been on record as saying those moments are my favorite. Like, of everything we do, the pure, unscripted, life or death, final moment things are, because we're all literally slow motion watching it with chariots of fire playing in the back of our mind. That stuff's great, and obviously that's not possible without the multitap. You know, because we use the Super Multitap to play NBA Jam on the SNES. This game is fun with 2 people. This game's ridiculously fun with 4 players.
It really is.
And it's not because necessarily the AI is awful. The AI is not awful. The AI is one of those AIs where, like, it'll do what you tell it to do, like call for passes, call for shots, or whatever. You have enough control over it that it's still an enjoyable and kind of strategic experience when you're playing 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 technically with 1 player on each side. But when you have the 4 players and you're like yelling at each other, like go there, do this, pass, no, why, you know. Plus, we had one bad controller while we were playing.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And that was the one that, like, the turbo button was, like, wonked out and not working, so that person would just stop dribbling and, like, start throwing their shoulders for no reason.
Just chicken dance in the middle of the
So
court.
I guess we were trying to simulate the bad arcade button experience, you know, here.
We were simulating the Player 4 Mad Catz controller.
Which is so dumb. Like, we have enough SNES controllers. I don't know why. I think we realized it too late to switch it out.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was, like, part way through the 3rd game that it happened or something like that.
Right.
So just one thing that was always kind of weird to me is like any game where you're not on screen for any portion of time is hard for me to play because the camera follows whoever's holding the ball.
Right.
And if you get stuck behind, then sucks to suck. It's really unfortunate for you who is back under your own net because you're never going to catch up, and it's kind of hard to see like what trajectory you're coming in on.
Right. Yeah, they use the little like 4-color like pointer arrows that are either over your head when you're on screen or like pointing off screen roughly where you are.
Yeah. But even still, like never having played with that, because you look at like newer like Street Fighter games and Marvel vs. Capcom type games. There are points when like I don't know who decides to follow, but there will be one dude up in the clouds and you're on the ground and you have no idea where you are.
Sure.
Yeah,
or at least I don't. I don't play these games that often, so when I do play them, I get absolutely housed by the guys who bring their own special gamepad like everywhere they go.
Yeah, I will note nobody brought their fighting stick to play NBA Jam Edition for our playthrough. I mentioned his name briefly during the open. Tim Kitzrow.
Tim Kitzrow.
Who does the famous voices for this. The phrases in this game are not just popular in NBA Jam, or not just known in gamer circles. I struggled when I was writing the review to find some other examples. I can't think personally of another game where the catchphrases, or sort of like the things that the game made a staple, transcended into the sport itself. Like, Tecmo is far and away, like, the most famous of the computerized games of its era. But, like, other than some of the neat things like the slow-motion high five or Bo Jackson being unbelievable. Like, NHL 94, Jeremy Roenick is unbelievable, whatever. Little things like that.
Right.
But you didn't have these, like, things becoming part of the lexicon. If someone says boom shakalaka or he's on fire at an NBA game, and the crowd knows what you're talking about. They're cheering. They get into it. Those catchphrases literally like migrated out into the ether.
It was a sports meme before the internet.
Yeah, really. That's a great way of putting it. It was. And I don't know. I guess credit that partly to the sort of absurdist presentation that Iguana and Midway went with for the game itself. Matt, when we talked about NES Ice Hockey earlier, the thing we kept coming to is, like, Blades of Steel looks better. Blades of Steel is closer to an authentic experience. NES Ice Hockey is a better video game.
Right.
That it felt more enjoyable, more fun. It accepted some abstraction of the actual sport to make a more fun overall experience. NBA Jam is far and away, I think, the quintessential high point for finding the perfect line between utterly absurd and still being a recreation of the sport. You still have 2-pointers and 3-pointers and halftime and quarters and substitutions, and dunks and blocks and steals and rebounds and all the things that we shape up to be the sport.
Right.
But you can jump 5 times higher than the net, and the ball can catch on fire, and there are weird spots on the floor and turbo buttons, and
or
you can push people.
Dumbass somersault off the screen to do a dunk when you come back down.
Sure. So, like, on the one hand, it's unbelievably ridiculous. And on, like, this hand, it's perfectly balanced. I think NES Ice Hockey might have been a little closer on, like, the simulation end, but maybe it had to be because it was a slower system, slower console, simpler time. And I always think of, like, NFL Blitz as being just a little farther on the absurdist scale than NBA Jam is. And I think NBA Jam sits on this, like, zenith of that curve, like, exactly where keeping some element of the sport and having a pure arcade experience meet.
You're still playing almost the exact same rules as an NBA basketball game. It's just over the top everything. NFL Blitz, there's no rules. You're just going nuts.
Yeah, and even like the base things of that game change from basic football. Like, there's no way to turn it down to 10-yard first downs. It's always 30.
Right.
And you every step you take is 5 yards, which just doesn't happen.
Yes.
You can leg drop people after the play. It's everything in that game is. It's still football. You're playing football by everything you're doing. You call plays, you run actions. But it's like if Vince McMahon directed football for good and for all, if he took threw away the XFL and became the NFL, that's kind of what we get with NFL Blitz. And I don't think you get the same feeling from Jam whatsoever. You can turn on these silly little 5-point spots.
Right.
And you can turn on, super run speed so that you're on one half of the court and then on the other half in the blink of an eye.
But it's optional.
Yeah, they're optional. They're not like baked into the main gameplay. They're not, required aspects of the game. They're just fun little things, which I think is, it speaks, good volumes to have that kind of customization, that sort of option, this early in, the console gaming, like home console gaming.
Yeah, sure. Just like if you unlock, some of the weird characters, they're digitized versions of like President Clinton or.
As I say, we didn't show any of them off. Who all can you get?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, there's kind of a wild collection of them. Depending on whether you're playing in the arcade or you're playing on home consoles, there's a list, just a wide list. I remember Clinton off the bat. I'll punch up real quick. I'll look up what the unlocks are for Tournament Edition for the SNES, so we've got the actual list. But they're obviously, their stats are unreal and their stuff.
Yeah.
There's something I wanted to punch on, and that's accessibility. I'm curious, Hillary, is that the first basketball game you've ever played?
No.
No.
I've played one other one where you could, break the backboard and all sorts of weird stuff.
Oh,
but
gosh.
It was a newer one.
I
don't know what the
a
name of it
newer
was,
one.
though.
Well, they
NBA
made an
Sport.
NBA Jam remake.
It could have been one of the remakes then. I don't know what it was, but I played it once, so.
Right. But you didn't seem to have any trouble figuring out how to play this game, at all.
No.
Right? And I think there are a lot of sports games you can sit down, especially now with Skill Stick and Shell and all these things. It can be hard to sit down and just immediately figure out how to play a game. It's obvious, painfully obvious, that this is an arcade game when you sit down and play it.
Yes.
Control stick to move around, one button shoots, one button passes, and those same two buttons turn into jump and block or steal or hit based on whether you're on offense or defense or running, right? A 2-button game like this is A, super easy to control, and B, way more importantly, super easy for anyone to pick up and figure out in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And for a 4-player game, that's huge because it can be hard, especially in circles of friends, to find 4 people who are all experts in a specific sport or fans of a specific sport, or even understand all the rules of something understanding goaltending, understanding double dribble, understanding 3-second violations, 5-second violations, all the minutia that come in basketball. But again, it hits a sweet spot. It hits a point where oh, okay, I figured it out, I understand the scoring thing, I get the passing, and we were giggling fools 15 minutes into the recording.
Well, and you bring up NHL, and that's a pretty good example, too, because NHL 14, they introduced the 2-button control scheme based off of NHL 94. They call it NHL 94 controls, trying to get older gamers back into the mix that are a little intimidated by the skill stick and all these other inputs you had to make to play. And, they wouldn't be able to do half of the features, they wouldn't be able to poke check, or they wouldn't be able to, flip the puck to dump it into the corner or anything like that, but they were still playing the game, and it worked to bring more people into the fold.
All right, so I've got a list here.
Oh, okay.
There are an unreal number of unlockable characters.
Yes.
I'm just going to go through, seriously, there's 3 dozen characters here.
Wow.
I'm just going to go off the major ones here. So we have Air Dog.
Air
Right.
Dog?
Yep. Kirby.
Uh-huh.
Kabuki, Snake, Heavy D. You can be Jazzy Jeff.
Oh, yeah, DJ Jazzy Jeff
Yep.
is in here, yeah.
Nice.
Moose Cat. You can be Prince Charles. Frank Thomas, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
There we go.
Yeah, so the Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy
Jazzy
Jeff were a
Jeff.
2.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Mark Turmel. Mike D was in the game, because of course he was. Crunch the mascot. Hillary Clinton, the Hornets mascot, the Chicago Bulls
Right,
mascot.
some of the mascots were in there.
And then Bill Clinton and Larry Bird.
Right. Okay, yes,
Well.
that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and there were a few others I didn't mention there because I don't even know who they are, like Scooter Pie. But there's a bunch of characters. So many characters.
Now, there's also some unused stuff. Credit to the folks at the cutting room floor for this. There are some unused elements that are still floating around the game. Apparently, Steven Tyler was at one point set to be in the game.
Oh, my God.
He's in incomplete state with some place howers. Juwan Howard, Cliff Rozier, they just default to Mookie Blaylock. Those are former players. And again, Shaq was cut prior to release because he... Jordan kind of explains this a bit, but they didn't really have the rules for the players' associations the way they do now, where they're if you're a member of this league and we sell the PA rights, everyone goes. There's no personal exclusion stuff. Back then, some players who controlled their own rights Like Jordan wouldn't allow himself to be in like 99% of video games because he knew the value of his likeness and he could sell it for a lot more.
So is Shaquille just like?
But Shaq is not in this version, but he's in the arcade version.
He's not even a famous O'Neal, Matt.
I'm just imagining Shaq's like, oh man, NBA Jam, that's cool. I got Shaq for coming up. That's gonna make millions.
But yeah, so all the unlockable players have speed 10, 3-pointers 10, dunks 10, pass 2, power 3 because they're not team players apparently. Steal 6, 8 block, and 8 clutch. So they're unbelievably good, other than passing and knocking people over. So they're there to do the high flying acrobatics and the big dunks, which makes sense.
If you're Clarence Beef Tank, you don't have to pass.
No, you 99 everything.
You just truck on through. And you know what? Going back to Tim Kitzrow, I'm kind of bummed because he did the commentary for NFL Blitz and NHL Hits and those other Midway sports games, and he didn't really get any iconic catchphrases from those. It's all NBA Jam.
I think it might have something to do with just like the sales of the game. Because like everyone knows Blitz, but I don't know how many people like bought Blitz or like played it every single day. Because I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was just the this era of the SNES. I mean, were there any other major sports games that came out around this time?
Sort of. So NBA Jam Tournament Edition was far and away like the popular one because NBA Jam did really well in '94 for home consoles. This came out in '95, a year later for them. Tecmo Super Bowl, the original Tecmo Super Bowl was a runaway success. Tecmo Super Bowl had Tecmo Super Bowl 2 and Tecmo Super Bowl 3, Special Edition and Final Edition, respectively. TSB 3 did fairly well. TSB 3 might be the most fun version of that to play, but TSB, the original, was certainly the most iconic and is still the most popular. The Madden series has started to hit its stride by the mid-90s. That was a little after this, but again, that's more simulation. Overseas, Sensible Soccer comes out.
Hold on.
Time out.
Now,
Yellow card. Sensible Soccer?
yes. So now, hear me out. You are going to think...
I think we found a game.
Wait,
we will play Sensible Soccer, Matt and I, at some point, because Sensible Soccer is the European football version of NES Ice Hockey or NBA Jam Tournament Edition. It's one of these games that is the perfect midpoint between goofy, arcadey style gameplay. It was made by Sensible Software. That's why it's got the name Sensible Soccer.
The name is just...
Yeah, but they don't call it soccer overseas. Would it be Furious Football?
No. It would be...
So it was originally released as Sensible Soccer European Champions in '92. This came out in '93 for arcades. But Sensible Soccer is amazing. The Amiga version of it's unreal. There is a version for SNES we can play that's decent. I want to see if we can get something slightly better than that, but we'll see. Whatever we can arrange here at the studio. But we will do that at some point.
Whatever's most sensible.
Yes.
The sensible chuckle.
Staying true to our, play the sports games that are just sitting at that happy point between arcade and simulation.
Yeah.
Other stuff to mention for this game. Digitized Actors. So we mentioned Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat is obviously very famous for digitized characters. There's a little of that here too. There's obviously some rotoscope and detection of the players because you have the neat 360, the way they spin around, the way the sprites are shaped and how they look. But then the faces. We have all these digitized faces for all these people along with their names. It really helps lend some personality because a lot of games in the 90s and especially in the 80s, you have these caricatures or cartoon versions of faces and they don't really look like the players themselves.
Right.
Now we're digitizing and putting the faces up here because the tech has caught up and we can do stuff like that and it looks great.
Yeah, if you play the SNES Rap Jam, once you get into the court, everybody looks exactly the same.
Yeah, and that's no fun, right?
They all have a t-shirt and a hat and they all look exactly the same.
And that was one of the... This was actually kind of a behind-the-scenes thing. This game is one of a couple reasons I wanted us to do digitized portraits for ourselves for the channel. Because I thought the sprites would be cool for, the cards to see who's playing and to be able to put them up on the screen for, here's who's controlling what character and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the portraits really give some personality and some life, and, you can really see the person, with that sort of 16-bit realism.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a neat thing. And having played a fair amount of NBA Jam Tournament Edition, as a kid, it was one of those things like, oh, it'd be so cool to have like your picture in there and actually see like, oh, hey,
Right.
it's it's us.
Yeah.
So that was sort of like, it was that combined with, I was also thinking of like old JRPGs where you could do like dialogue boxes and stuff, and you see that when we do like our pop-ups, like talking about stuff in game.
Yeah.
But it was just as much that as for the communicative side that NBA Jam kind of expires. Like, wow, you really kind of see the person, and it means more than just having like the caricature alone. Having both in tandem works really well.
I can see that.
Should update my my pixel profile. My hair's a lot more wild than it was in that picture.
Expand.
Samson's power grows as the hair grows.
I don't know. I'm kind of rusty at Ninja Gaiden these days.
Oh, no.
Those birds gonna get me.
Well, that's right. You were working on Silius anyway.
I was.
So.
Am. Was. Is. Am.
Yep. So I think that covers just about everything I wanted to mention. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to throw in before we call this a review?
I'm not really a big sports gamer, frankly, but there's a few out there that I'll always be happy to play, and this is one of them. I'll never be good at it, but that's okay. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It's that's all it is.
Yeah,
it's
it's just fun.
It's
Yeah.
just fun. Yeah.
I'm so amused by what Turnell noted with the being a fan of the Pistons. It's so just a brief slice of sports history here. The Pistons were kind of the bad boys of the NBA for a couple of years, and they were renowned for sort of throwing elbows and shoulders and playing you tough in the paint and like knocking him down. And they won their 2 titles with like a very physical defense and a very like aggressive style of play. And then that was kind of, from that point onward, Jordan's teams just like ran the gamut in the 90s. They won 3 straight. Then Jordan took some time off after his father's death, I believe, to like play baseball and get away from the NBA for a couple of years. Those were the 2 years the Rockets won. And then Jordan comes back and the Bulls win 3 more championships when he shows up again. So you can just, the idea that like the guy who makes this is such a fan of the Pistons that like you could see enough at the Bulls that you would put in a little snippet of code in the game that says, by the way, if there's 2 seconds left and the Bulls are taking a shot to win or lose the game, make them miss it. Like, that to me is just delicious evil.
I love it.
Right?
So it's also like petty as all
oh,
hell.
it's
This is the most petty I've ever seen a game developer
It's
do.
super petty. So, like, the guy at EA Sports being a friend of Jeremy Roenick, so making Jeremy Roenick the best player in the thing is, like, endearing, if a little annoying.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
This is just mean. So, yeah, I just wanted to, like, I guess kudos for being willing to take that step and just share your vitriol with the world.
Perfect.
He's owning
I don't
it.
think you understand how much I hated the Bulls back in those days.
Yeah. So,
that's good fun.
oh, definitely. All right. I think that pretty much wraps this one up.
That certainly does it for me.
Excellent.
All right. As always, thank you so much for listening. All the episodes for NBA Jam Tournament Edition are in Season 1 here on the channel, so enjoy them.
So dig deep to find them.
Yes.
And we will catch you next time.
See you guys.
See you later.